What is going on, Neon Nation? Welcome back to the Neon Arcade for a Cyberpunk 2077 news update. With the release of Cyberpunk, we have a ton of updates to go over, including some performance hitches with the base consoles from last gen, some warnings from CDPR about DMCA strikes, and warnings about seizures from Braindance segments, some statistics on Cyberpunk 2077's launch and some of the raw numbers, as well as Metacritic scores. First up, we have the release of the official trailer just days before launch, which not only got everyone's hype up to fever pitch levels, but also included a secret message from CDPR. In this message, CDPR mentions their anticipation for the launch of the game, and that while they're not ready to talk about expansions, they will say that they learned a lot from Hearts of Stone and Blood and Wine, and that their planned expansions will take you even deeper into the world of Cyberpunk 2077, offering substantial story-driven content that will give you tough choices to make through impactful dialogue that you won't soon forget. Before they get there, they'll be kicking off free DLC programs in early 2021, and just like with The Witcher 3, expect an assortment of free DLC packs. Next up, let's go over some of the raw stats from the launch of Cyberpunk 2077 via CDPR's Investors Relation page. In the first of many tweets, CDPR IR released that they had sold a whopping 8 million pre-orders, with the sales split of pre-orders being 74% in favor of the digital version, which is to be expected not only due to the trajectory of how games are sold over the last couple years, but also restrictive social guidelines in the world at the moment. Pre-order sales split has been 59% in favor of PC, and because CDPR has reached the threshold of sales on Steam, now collects 80% of the royalties there. Cyberpunk 2077 also now holds the title for the most concurrent viewers for any single player game ever on Twitch, at one point eclipsing 1 million viewers, and has cracked the top 10 games of all time for this statistic. On Steam, right after the release, 2077 also hit 700,000 concurrent users. Obviously, the game is now out and has received a 91 critic score, which is what CDPR wanted based on an investors call a month or so ago, post final delay announcement. This is purely for the PC version, with many reviewers marking down Cyberpunk 2077 mainly on the basis that it was very buggy and glitchy from the get-go. This was my experience too with the review codes applied by CDPR, although running through the game on a high-end PC was fairly enjoyable regardless, and did run fairly smoothly. Now, console codes were not provided, and now that Cyberpunk 2077 is in the hands of the general population, it seems like we're beginning to get a better idea of why. Many playing on the base versions of the PS4 and the Xbox One from last generation are encountering a lofty list of issues, including frequent crashing, graphical fidelity that looks like it's from a prior generation, and overall bugginess. Now, some have reported the game to be running fine with some hitches here and there, but overall, it hasn't been an overly smooth launch, despite most people mentioning that even with the hiccups, the game itself when it works is a great experience. Now, I asked you guys on Twitter what your experience has been, and here are some of the comments. Victor mentions that it's been rough. Don't get me wrong, I'm loving the game and everything around it. The performance and optimization is just awful. He goes on to mention, my screen freezes when I fight 4+ enemies. I can't hear the car radio often. It won't read other inputs when driving, and consistently drops under 30 frames per second. 2 crashes, 1 infinite loading screen, and consistent audio glitches. This is on the base PS4, which in my research is currently the least optimal experience. Jim Morrison, the man, the myth, the legend from the Mad Queen streams, mentions that he has the PS4 Standard Edition, and in 13 hours he's crashed 4 times, with all errors seeming to be when the game is forced to load too many assets. Sasha says, base Xbox One, only major thing for me is the graphics, but to be honest I was expecting them not to be the best. I wish it was better. Hopefully there'll be a patch that helps a bit later down the line, but I'm still having fun honestly, and I love the game. Bearded Viking also mentions that he's on the base PS4 and he had to disable things like motion blur, film grain, and chromatic aberration. When you do that, it's not that bad. Edward mentions that it's okay, the graphics ain't great, and my game crashed twice, but I'm still in love with the game and I can't let go. Now hopefully CDPR rolls out some fixes in the coming weeks and months, but if you want to experience Night City at the best it can be, which is what I recommend because the stories and world are truly amazing, I would either hold off until you can get your hands on next gen, or more hotfixes and patches are put out over the next couple weeks and months. Between Amazon and Best Buy releasing the game early, leaks, and now poor performance and bugs across all platforms, it's safe to say that this has been a bumpy launch, but hopefully in time, CDPR chips away at these like they did with The Witcher 3. Speaking of bugs, there are some pretty funny ones to be fair, and if you guys caught the pre-release stream yesterday, I also encountered one of the funnier ones where yes, your junk clips through your pants and just dangles there menacingly until you notice it. This seems to be a common issue, and there are a variety of other hilarious glitches, so honestly you gotta take the good with the bad. Moving on, we have details from CDPR on an issue with DMCA tracks and potential seizure risks in the Braindance segments of the game. First, we have the Cyberpunk Twitter page mentioning, quote, "We just noticed there's a song in the game which might put a DMCA strike on your channel even when playing with the disabled copyrighted music option. While we work on fixing it, please make sure to turn off sound during the first 2 Braindance sequences. They followed up with saying that it has come to their attention that there are additional instances in the game which might put a DMCA strike on your channel. There is a fix on the way, but until then, you're gonna have to mute music in the game setting entirely. Now Cyberpunk 2077 has also collaborated with one of my personal favorite YouTube channels to find out the science behind the transhumanistic idea of uploading your minds, living forever, and the potential consequences for humanity. If that's interesting to you, there will be a link in the pinned comment. Next we have a Q&A via channel friend Paris Lilly with senior level designer Miles Tost and senior quest designer Patrick Mills. The first question is how the team came up with the life path options and if there's anything specific which influenced this. Patrick Mills mentions the TTRPG which 2077 is based on in Cyberpunk 2020 and that the tabletop RPG system also had life paths which tells you where your character is from, if you have family members, friends, and experiences. They brought out what they thought were the 3 most iconic experiences from the TTRPG. In a question about what the team thought would be the biggest developmental hurdles when they first started work on Cyberpunk 2077, they mentioned that production and how much everything would cost and the general challenges of iteration in game development. The next question is what is the process behind creating quests, and what do they choose to port from 2020 to 2077? Patrick mentions that in quest design they start with an idea, either a cool character or a scene. This gets turned into a paragraph description and handed over to a quest designer who creates the gameplay chunks and pacing, and then you put them together and you iterate and iterate. As for what they kept and what they didn't keep from the 2020 lore, Mills mentions that they did want it to have some continuity, but they did want to add their own twists and spins. Omissions are made if they feel like something doesn't make sense or fit. The next question that's brought up is how much does level design impact quest concepts and structure, which comes first and which influences the other. Miles mentions that it really bounces off each other. In The Witcher they made places and they filled it with content later, but it also does go the other way with the idea being first and quest designers requesting a stage for this content. It is a mutualistic relationship, but Miles as a level designer admits that quest design is paramount since level design can kind of flow around it. It's harder to change narratives, but it's easier to change levels. The next question is about open worlds and when it's decided that enough content is enough. Typically when it comes to this, production and directors make the call on when to stop. In a question about how much the game has changed since the teaser trailer, Mills mentions that you build stuff up and you build them back, but you only keep what worked before. He also claims there's been a lot of build up and build back. Early demos will show you the skeleton, but the details change and it's pretty different. When it comes to the highlight of development, Mills mentions that when everything comes together and you're playing the game, that is the peak. For him, he didn't want to stop playing Cyberpunk, and for Miles this was quite similar. That is all I got for you guys today. I'm off to play some more Cyberpunk. I hope you guys are enjoying it, and thanks for getting me to 77k on launch day. It's been a wild 2-year ride, and I cannot wait to make more content for 2077 for you guys in the future.